Ever think about how, like, just saying something, calling it something, could make it real? Like,
Interesting.
we're diving into this idea today, this theory that labeling a kid, like saying they stutter, might actually cause them to stutter.
Yeah, this is Wendell Johnson we're talking about. Back in the 30s, he had this theory, called it the diagnosogenic theory.
Diagnose of what?
Diagnosogenic. It's the idea that, well, the label of stutterer could actually, like, create the stutter itself.
Whoa, that's pretty out there, right? Totally different from how we think about it now.
Right. And to, see if this theory held any water, he and his grad student, Mary Tudor, came up with this study.
Okay, gotta ask, this study has a pretty intense nickname, the Monster Study. So what happened?
All right, so picture this. Late 1930s, you're in Iowa at an orphanage.
Okay.
And Mary Tudor, she's doing her master's thesis under Johnson's guidance. She takes 22 orphans, splits them into groups.
Standard study stuff, what made it, well, monstrous?
The experimental group. These kids, they were told they had speech problems, labeled stutterers, even though they weren't.
Hold on, so they took kids who were speaking normally and told them they had a problem.
Exactly. And to make things even more interesting, most of these kids in the experimental group were older than when stuttering usually starts.
Whoa, so these kids have been talking fine for years.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, this is getting messed up.
It is. And if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of it, the language they used with these kids is something else.
Oh, lay it on me. What'd they actually say?
We have quotes from the source material, pretty clear picture. Tudor told these kids things like, the staff, we think you have a lot of trouble talking with your speech. You show signs of a child who's, well, beginning to stutter. It's really important that you work on this. Got to fix this.
Wow. Talk about planting a seed of doubt,
And
really.
it's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
And the study, well, it showed exactly that. These kids, they clammed up. They started speaking less, way slower, shorter answers. You can imagine how self-conscious they became.
So their speech actually got worse because of this experiment, even though they weren't stutterers to begin with.
It does seem to support Johnson's theory, yeah. But there's a huge caveat here. This study, it never officially saw the light of day, never published.
Why not?
Ethical concerns, big ones.
Yeah, I can see why. Okay, but did they at least, check up on these kids afterward? What happened to them?
This is where it gets even trickier. The study itself, it was just for a semester. But there are these anecdotal reports, even letters, that suggest some of these kids kept having speech problems long after the study was over.
Wait, are you saying some of these kids might have actually become stutterers for life because of this?
It's a disturbing thought, right? We
Yeah.
can't say for sure, but Tudor, she kept visiting these kids for years, and there are letters showing real concern about how they were speaking.
Man, that's just, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Like, scientifically, I guess it kind of proves his point, but at what cost?
Right. This is where we have to talk about the ethical implications of all this, because
Okay, so this monster study, ethically, yeah, huge mess. But what happened after? Did those kids, did they ever get any justice?
that's the question that's lingered around the study, for decades. For a long time, it was pretty much buried. Not many people knew about it, not much discussion.
So how did it finally come to light?
It took a while. Late 90s, early 2000s, the story started getting some traction. Articles popped up. Folks started asking tough questions. And finally, in 2001, the University of Iowa, where the study was done, they issued a formal apology.
At least they acknowledged they screwed up. But an apology, it doesn't really fix the damage, does it?
No, you're right, it doesn't. But it was a step. And then, a few years later, in 2007, there was another development. 6 of the people from the study, the ones who were still alive, and the families of some who weren't, they reached a settlement with the state of Iowa for the harm they went through.
It's hard to even grasp, what a settlement would look like in a situation like this. How do you even put a dollar amount on that?
Right. I mean, how do you compensate for being told you're something you're not, especially at such a young age? It's a tough one. And it brings up a really crucial point. We're talking about the balance between, scientific curiosity, the need to learn and understand, and the responsibility we have to treat people ethically.
Yeah, it's like a huge reminder that we all got to make sure research is done the right way. Asking questions, demanding transparency, holding those researchers accountable. Can't just blindly accept findings without considering, the human cost.
Absolutely. That critical thinking, it's essential, especially now in this age of information overload.
Hmm.
Got to look at the source, the methods, any potential biases, the whole 9 yards.
So after this whole deep dive into the monster study, with all its ethical baggage and the implications, what's the takeaway for our listener? What can we learn from this cautionary tale?
Well, first and foremost, this study screams the need for ethical considerations in all research, period. Protecting the participants, their well-being, their rights, that's got to be priority number one.
And second,
Yeah.
it reinforces that whole thing about how much words, how much labels can really impact, especially kids. The power of suggestion. It's not just some theoretical thing. It's real. We need to be so mindful of that.
Precisely. What we say and how we say it, it matters a lot. Words, they shape beliefs, they influence actions, they can even potentially alter the course of someone's life. It's a responsibility we all got to take seriously.
It's like a ripple effect. I
Yeah.
think. Like one word, one label, and it just, keeps going.
Yeah, exactly. And this brings us back to Johnson's theory, that diagnosogenic theory. Even though the study itself was flawed, ethically speaking, the core idea, that our perceptions, our expectations, they can influence how people develop, that still holds a lot of weight.
So even though this whole monster study was this dark chapter in research, it accidentally taught us some valuable lessons about human nature, about the responsibility that comes with knowledge, right?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to put it. It's a reminder that even when we're trying to understand things, we can't ever lose sight of our humanity. We have an obligation to do no harm.
It's like the study cast a shadow over the whole field of speech pathology, reminding us that even with the best intentions, we can make mistakes that have, lasting effects.
It definitely makes you think, makes you wonder what other, monster studies might be out there waiting to be uncovered.
Ooh, yeah, that's a question to ponder. All right. And maybe, just maybe, by learning from the past, from these mistakes, we can ensure that research in the future, it's done with the utmost care and respect. Respect for everyone involved. It's kind of scary to think about, right? Something like the monster study actually happening, even if it was a while ago. It really makes you wonder if we've, truly learned from those ethical messes.
Yeah, it definitely gives you pause. And, well, we can't go back and change things, but we can definitely learn from it. This whole thing, the monster study, it's this huge reminder, this flashing red light, that ethics in research, especially when you're dealing with vulnerable folks, that's gotta be front and center.
Right. It's like that quote, "Those who can't remember the past are doomed to repeat it." Can't let something like this happen again.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, research ethics. This monster study, it really highlights that bigger issue of the power of language. We talked about how it affects kids, but really it applies to everyone. The words we use, the labels, they really do have consequences.
Like we're all walking around with this power, to affect each other for good or bad.
Exactly. And this study, it's like it zooms in on that power, shows us in a pretty dramatic way what can happen when words are used carelessly or even, with bad intentions.
So what's the antidote? If words can be so damaging, how do we use them for good? How do we use that power the right way?
Ugh, the million-dollar question, right? I think it starts with awareness. We have to really think about the weight our words carry and choose them carefully.
Yeah, like thinking before you speak, right? But it's even more than that, isn't it? It's like being intentional, choosing words that build people up, that empower instead of tearing down.
Exactly. It's recognizing that words, they can be weapons, but they can also be tools. And it's up to each of us to decide, how we're going to use them.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the monster study with all its disturbing stuff, what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with? What's the main takeaway from this unsettling but really important story?
If I had to sum it all up, I'd say this. Words, they have power. They can shape how we see things, what we believe, even our reality. Let's use them wisely, with compassion, with understanding, and let's be mindful of the labels we use for ourselves and for others. They can have a huge impact.
This has been, a heavy topic, but so important. It's a reminder that knowledge, it comes with responsibility. Got to be aware of the potential for harm, even when it comes from, a seemingly harmless place like scientific curiosity. And we can use our words to build each other up, not tear each other down. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.